What would you do if, on the happiest day of your son's life, his bride smiled sweetly and told you to stand by the bathroom wall so you wouldn't ruin the wedding photos with your age? Most mothers would swallow the insult, smile through the tears, and pray the night would pass quickly. But Martha Williams did something no one expected. She picked up her gift, walked out of the reception, and left behind whispers that would soon turn into late-night phone calls filled with shock and desperation. Because inside that beautifully wrapped box wasn't just a wedding present, it was a secret worth millions, a secret that would expose the true cost of greed, disrespect, and betrayal. Tonight on Silent Lies, we reveal how a single cruel sentence changed everything forever. Stay with us, subscribe now, and prepare yourself for a story you will never forget. At first, I thought I had misheard her. The music was playing softly, the clinking of champagne glasses filled the reception hall, and my son's bride leaned toward me with that flawless, rehearsed smile. But her words sliced through the air sharper than any knife. Could you stand by the bathroom wall? The photographer says it will be better for the pictures. You understand, right? We just want the photos to look young and fresh. I felt my body stiffen, though I forced a polite smile across my face. Young and fresh. The unspoken meaning was clear, old and disposable. In that moment, surrounded by laughter and glittering dresses, I was no longer a mother celebrating her son's happiest day. I was a blemish they wanted hidden, a shadow to be pushed aside so their carefully curated image would remain perfect for Instagram. I did not argue, I did not cry, I did not beg. I simply reached for the elegantly wrapped gift I had placed on the table earlier that day. White paper, silver ribbon, and inside, something that would have changed their lives forever. I lifted it with steady hands, though my heart pounded with a mixture of humiliation and clarity. Without a word, I turned away from the table, away from the music, away from my son who was laughing with his best man, oblivious to the humiliation his wife had just delivered. No one tried to stop me. A few relatives glanced up, startled by the sight of me walking past with the box clutched tightly against my chest. Great Aunt Helen gasped, her fork frozen in midair, but she said nothing. Most of the guests were Brittany's friends, young professionals more concerned with capturing the perfect video of the first dance than noticing the quiet retreat of the groom's mother. The heavy doors of the reception hall closed behind me with a final thud, and the muffled music dissolved into the cool night air. I stepped into the parking lot, the silver bow gleaming faintly under the streetlight, and I let out the breath I had been holding. For a moment, I simply stood there, listening to the faint sounds of celebration, wondering how I had allowed myself to believe fairy tales about unconditional love. 36 years. 36 years of sacrifice, of saving pennies, of putting my son first. 36 years of believing that loyalty and devotion would be enough to earn a place of respect in his new life. But respect, it seemed, was not part of the package. Not from him, and certainly not from the woman who now wore his ring. A taxi rolled up slowly, the driver eyeing me curiously as if he wondered why a guest would leave before the cake had even been cut. I slid into the back seat, the box still pressed tightly against me. The ride lasted only 15 minutes, but in those 15 minutes, a lifetime unraveled. Each passing streetlight illuminated the truth I had refused to see. I was not wanted in their picture, and I never truly had been. The driver cleared his throat and glanced at me in the mirror. "Everything all right, ma'am?" I met his eyes briefly, then looked away. "I'm exactly where I need to be," I said, my voice steady, though my chest ached. Back in my small apartment, I placed the gift box gently on the table. The irony nearly made me laugh. Hours earlier, I had dressed in my best clothes, styled my hair, and walked into that wedding with hope swelling in my chest. I had told myself this would be the turning point, the moment my son and his new wife would finally see me as more than a financial burden or an aging inconvenience. Inside that box, I had given them more than a present. I had given them the possibility of a different future. Now it sat unopened in my living room, glowing like a beacon of what could have been. I brewed myself a cup of tea, the same way I always did on lonely evenings, and lowered myself into Harold's old chair, the only piece of furniture I had refused to sell after he passed. The chair creaked beneath me, a reminder of the life we had built together and the emptiness that remained after his death. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the teacup, but the trembling was not from weakness. It was from something new, something sharp and unfamiliar. Power. For the first time in years, I felt powerful. The phone rang later that night. Voices filled the line of me son's first. Then his bride's questions tumbling out in a rush. Why had I left? Was I sick? Was something wrong? Their concerns sounded hollow, rehearsed. I listened, sipping my tea, eyes fixed on the white box on the table. They had no idea what was inside, no idea what I had been ready to give. And now, they never would. Their words blurred together as I leaned back in Harold's chair, the weight of betrayal settling over me like a heavy blanket. But beneath that blanket, something else burned. A promise. They would learn soon enough that not every mother is willing to be erased. Some mothers know when it is time to stop giving, stop apologizing, and start reclaiming what was taken from them. That night, I made my decision. Walking away from the wedding was not an ending. It was the beginning. 3 weeks before the wedding, I was standing in the fluorescent light of Murphy's Corner Market, my purse clutched to my chest, my fingers counting out coins with a precision that came from years of stretching every penny. A can of soup, a packet of saltines. That was dinner. My receipt would read a balance of $2,347, left until the next Social Security check arrived. 2 weeks to survive. 2 weeks to keep breathing. 2 weeks before I had to put on a dress I could barely afford and smile as though I belonged at a celebration that had cost more than everything I owned combined. The boy behind the counter, though, he was no longer really a boy, smiled wearily. Tommy Murphy. I had known him since he was a teenager bagging groceries for after-school money. Now he was older. His shoulders slouched from double shifts, his eyes heavy but kind. "Evening, Mrs. Williams," he said as he slid the soup across the counter. "Jackpot's up to 62 million. Machines are still working if you're interested." I almost laughed out loud. Me, who walked everywhere to save bus fare. Me, who skipped meals so I could write checks for wedding flowers and photographers. Me, who had been told more than once by my son's fiancée that older people don't need much space, when she encouraged me to move out of my tiny apartment. What business did I have dreaming about millions? But something stubborn rose inside me. Maybe it was the memory of Brittany flaunting her third designer handbag that month while I sipped tap water at a family dinner. Maybe it was David's casual dismissal of my struggles, as though poverty were a choice I had stubbornly clung to. Or maybe it was the simple, reckless thought that I was tired of being careful. "One ticket," I heard myself say. My voice sounded foreign, reckless, alive. Tommy raised his brows but fed the $5 bill into the machine. The slip of paper slid out, small and unimpressive. 6 numbers, a sequence that looked like nothing more than ink on thin paper. But I folded it carefully and tucked it next to the receipt, as if instinct already knew it was different. 7, 14, 21, 35, 47. Powerball 9. I walked the 45 minutes back to my apartment, the numbers whispering in my mind. Every step replayed every insult, every look of pity, every time I had been told to sit quietly and be grateful. By the time I climbed the 3 flights of stairs, I knew something in me had shifted. Win or lose, I was finished playing the role of their backup wallet, their silent obligation, their aging burden. That Saturday night, I sat alone with my tea, the television volume turned down so I wouldn't disturb the neighbors. The announcer's voice was bright, mechanical, as the numbers rolled out one by one. 7, 14, 21, 35, 47. Powerball 9. My heart stopped, then pounded so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. I checked the ticket. Once, twice, 10 times. My eyes blurred, but the numbers never changed. 62 million. After taxes, 38 million. More money than I could have imagined in 1,000 lifetimes. For a long moment, I simply sat frozen in my chair, the old upholstery creaking under my weight, the room spinning with the enormity of it all. Then laughter bubbled up, strange and sharp. Not joy, not relief. Something darker, something freer. I did not call David. I did not call anyone. The thought of his voice, expectant and greedy, was enough to silence that impulse. Instead, I placed the ticket in my jewelry box, right beside Harold's wedding ring and my mother's pearls. Sacred things, protected things. And now, this little slip of paper that meant my entire life was about to change. The following week passed in a haze. The lottery office was sterile. Beige walls and fluorescent lights that seemed insultingly ordinary for a place where fortunes were handed out. A woman named Janet guided me through the process, her tone as casual as if she were processing a parking permit. $38.4 million after taxes. I nodded, signed papers, handed over identification. The whole time I felt as if I were walking in someone else's skin, but I knew exactly what I wanted. First, a car. Not flashy, nothing that would scream for attention, just a dependable Toyota Camry. Then furniture to replace the pieces I had lived with for decades, the sagging couch that had outlasted my marriage, the chipped table I had inherited from neighbors. I bought what I needed for both my apartment and something more, because there was one purchase I had dreamed of quietly for years, the oceanfront property on Lighthouse Drive. I had passed it countless times on my long, lonely walks, staring at its sprawling windows and its view of the Atlantic. To imagine a life there had always felt like fantasizing about being royalty impossible, laughable, cruel to even hope for. But now, as I stood on that deck, the sea wind tugging at my hair, I did not hesitate. "I'll take it," I told the realtor, her pen nearly slipping from her fingers. $2.8 million. Paid in cash. And yet, as breathtaking as that house was, I had one more plan in mind. David's wedding was in just 2 weeks. They expected me to arrive in my modest dress with a small wrapped package containing crystal glasses I had already sacrificed too much to buy, but I would bring them something else instead. I arranged a cashier's check for $3 million, tucked it alongside the deed to the Lighthouse Drive house, and wrapped them both in white paper with a silver bow. My hands shook as I tied the ribbon, but not with fear, with anticipation. For 2 weeks, I imagined their faces when they opened it. The tears, the gratitude, maybe even the apology that had been missing for years. I told myself that this gift would be the bridge, the final proof of my love, the thing that would erase all their thoughtless words. I rehearsed it like a play. The unveiling, the shock, the reconciliation. I would not be the bitter widow scraping by anymore. I would be the mother who gave everything. Of course, I did not yet know that my gift would never be opened. The morning of the wedding, I awoke with a flutter in my chest I had not felt in decades. Hope, anticipation, maybe even a little pride. My modest apartment looked brighter that day, as if the thin sunlight creeping through the blinds knew I was preparing to change everything. On my kitchen counter sat the gift, wrapped in white paper and tied with silver ribbon. Inside was not crystal stemware, not some token of survival purchased at great sacrifice, but a deed to an oceanfront home and a cashier's check for $3 million. My heart swelled just imagining my son's face when he realized his mother had given him everything. I had my hair styled professionally for the first time since Harold's funeral. My navy blue dress, beaded subtly at the sleeves, was the most expensive garment I had purchased in years. Even my shoes, simple but elegant, were brand new. I wanted to look my best not because of vanity, but because this day represented redemption. It was the day I would be transformed from a struggling widow into a benefactor. The day my sacrifices would be recognized. The ceremony was beautiful. David looked strong and confident at the altar, his tuxedo sharp, his smile reminiscent of his father's. Brittany was radiant, her designer gown shimmering under the stained glass windows. As they exchanged vows, tears welled in my eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were the kind a mother sheds when she believes her role has finally shifted from provider to cherished guest. At the reception, white roses and golden accents decorated the tables, the air thick with music and champagne. Waiters floated from table to table, offering hors d'oeuvres that smelled far richer than anything I could have cooked in my small kitchen. I was seated near the back, with elderly relatives and acquaintances, the polite position for someone expected to smile quietly and not disturb the grandeur. Still, I did not mind. My heart was with that white box on the gift table, waiting for the moment it would be opened. I watched my son laugh, watched his bride twirl on the dance floor, and whispered silently, "Just wait. You'll see how much I love you." Hours passed. Toasts were made. The couple danced and glowed beneath chandeliers. My anticipation grew with each clink of glass. And then Brittany approached. She had changed into a sleek reception gown, her hair and makeup still flawless. Her smile was polished, camera-ready, the kind of smile that conceals sharp edges. She leaned close to me, lowering her voice as though sharing a secret. "Martha," she said sweetly, "could I ask you a tiny favor?" I nodded, unaware of the dagger about to be delivered. "The photographer wants to take some family photos near the entrance. The lighting is perfect there." She paused, her smile unwavering. "But, could you stand by the bathroom wall instead? With your age, you know, we want the photos to look young and fresh for social media. You understand, right?" For a heartbeat, the world froze. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the music all muted. My skin prickled with heat. My throat tightened. At our table, forks stilled, eyes widened. Someone gasped. But Brittany's expression remained unchanged, as if she had just requested that I pass the salt. "I understand perfectly," I replied, my voice calm despite the humiliation scorching through me. I rose slowly. My dress rustled, the beads catching the light as I crossed the floor. I walked straight to the gift table, my gaze fixed on the white box that had consumed my thoughts for 2 weeks. My hands did not tremble as I lifted it. Silver ribbon glistened beneath the chandeliers, mocking the moment. Then I walked past the guests, past the photographers, past my son, who was adjusting his tie, blissfully unaware of the wound his bride had inflicted. I did not stop. I did not falter. I carried that box, heavy with promise and betrayal, through the reception doors and into the night. The cool air struck me like baptism. The muffled celebration faded behind me. I inhaled deeply, my chest expanding with something I had not felt in years. Freedom. The taxi driver noticed, of course. A woman leaving a wedding clutching a gift box was not a common sight. He kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "Everything okay, ma'am? You sure you don't want to go back?" "I'm exactly where I need to be," I told him, and the truth of those words settled into my bones. Back home, I placed the box on my coffee table. Inside was everything they had ever dreamed of. The deed to a seaside home worth millions and a check that would have erased their debts, secured their future, and bought their gratitude. Outside the box was me, the mother who was too old, too unfashionable, too inconvenient to appear in their photos. The irony was bitter enough to make me smile. I brewed tea, sat in Harold's old chair, and let the silence wrap around me. For years I had believed that love and sacrifice guaranteed respect. But respect, I realized, could not be bought with money or earned with endurance. It had to be given freely, and if it wasn't, no amount of giving could force it. The phone began to ring later that night. David's voice, frantic and confused, filled the line. "Mom, Brittany said you left. What happened? Are you okay?" I sipped my tea, staring at the white box. "I'm better than I have been in years," I said evenly. He pushed, bewildered, his tone edging toward irritation. I deflected, calm and deliberate. When Brittany called, her voice coated in honey, I asked her the question directly. "Did you tell me to stand by the bathroom wall so I wouldn't ruin your photos with my age?" There was silence, hesitation, then excuses. She blamed the photographer, blamed the lighting, blamed stress. But the truth hung heavy between us. She had said it, and she had meant it. I ended the calls politely but firmly. For 36 years I had been their safety net, their quiet resource, their invisible support. But not anymore. That night I realized something profound. Walking away with that box was not the end of anything. It was the beginning of everything. In the days that followed, the phone calls did not stop. They came at dawn, in the middle of the night, at times when silence should have been mine alone. At first, it was David's voice, layered with confusion and concern. "Mom, you left before the cake cutting. People were asking. Brittany said you seemed upset. What happened?" His tone danced uneasily between worry and irritation, as though my absence had embarrassed him more than it had hurt him. I could almost hear the strain in his voice, the unspoken expectation that I would fold, apologize, explain myself away as being too sensitive. That phrase had haunted me for years. Too sensitive when I noticed I wasn't invited to dinner. Too sensitive when Christmas plans were canceled at the last minute. Too sensitive when Brittany laughed about how people on fixed incomes should adjust their expectations. This time, I did not swallow it. Instead, I let silence be my weapon. When Brittany called, her tone was syrupy sweet, dripping with the kind of rehearsed sincerity only she could perfect. "Martha, I'm so sorry if I said something the wrong way. You know how weddings are, everything's chaotic, everything's rushed. I would never intentionally hurt you." Her words were smooth, but the jagged truth underneath was obvious. She wanted me to forgive, forget, and slide seamlessly back into my role. The convenient mother-in-law, the occasional check writer, the woman who should be grateful to orbit their perfect little universe. "Brittany," I interrupted quietly, "did you ask me to stand by the bathroom wall so I wouldn't ruin the photos with my age?" A pause, long enough for truth to sting. Then excuses. "Well, what I meant was, the photographer thought the lighting was better." I let her unravel. Every excuse only confirmed what I already knew. I had been reduced to a blemish in her curated vision of family. I agreed, of course, to attend the gift opening at their home the next day. My tone was pleasant. my promise sincere. But the box that mattered, the deed and the check, remained hidden in my apartment. Instead, I prepared a small decoy gift. Something modest. Something meaningless compared to what they had lost. When I walked into their home, the atmosphere was warm, festive, filled with chatter and clinking glasses. Brittany rushed to greet me with a dazzling smile, her arms outstretched as though the previous night's cruelty had been nothing more than a misunderstanding. "I'm so glad you came, Martha. Yesterday was stressful. I hope you know how much we love you." The performance was flawless, but her eyes betrayed her, sharp, calculating, already searching for cracks. They opened gifts one by one, each present more lavish than the last. Artwork, kitchen appliances, elegant luggage. My original gift, the crystal wine glass, earned polite praise, the kind that skimmed the surface but never touched the heart. "Beautiful, Mom. Thank you," David said, holding them up to the light. But I was not finished. "Actually," I said, rising to my feet, "I brought one more gift." A hush fell over the room as I handed them the small box. David opened it eagerly, his brow furrowing at the sight of a single key and a folded piece of paper. "What's this too, Mom?" "The key to my new apartment," I said simply. "The address is written down." Confusion rippled across his face. The apartment was upscale, a place far beyond the means he thought I had. I told them it was purchased with Harold's life insurance money I had been saving for an emergency. Not quite a lie, but not the full truth either. Brittany's smile flickered, strained. "That's wonderful, Martha. Really wonderful. Independence is so important." But I could see it in their eyes, the quick exchange of glances, the flicker of calculation. For years, they had relied on the assumption that I would remain in the shadows, financially limited, quietly dependent. The discovery that I had resources of my own shifted the balance. They thought they had questions about my future, about medical expenses, about whether I was being too impulsive. But what they really wanted was access to money they believed should flow naturally toward them, like inheritance delivered early. I smiled, sipping my tea, pretending not to notice the hunger in their eyes, because while they thought they were peeling back my secrets, the truth was I had already peeled back theirs. Rebecca Chen's report had arrived just days earlier, the private investigator I had hired after Brittany's crocodile tear apology. She had confirmed what my gut already knew. David and Brittany were drowning in debt, credit cards maxed, student loans unresolved, a mortgage eating nearly half of David's income. Their elegant lifestyle was nothing more than smoke and mirrors. They needed me. Not out of love, not out of respect, but because they were desperate. And I, for the first time, held the power to say no. The days that followed were filled with subtle prodding. "Mom, have you thought about updating your will?" "Mom, at your age, long-term care insurance is so important." "Mom, maybe you should meet with a financial planner. Brittany's grandmother knows someone excellent." Every suggestion cloaked in concern, but every word heavy with greed. They were circling, waiting for the moment I would break, reveal, hand over the wealth they suspected. But I remained silent. The irony was almost poetic. For years they had dismissed me, belittled me, erased me from their photographs. And now, suddenly, I was the center of their attention, not because they had rediscovered my worth as a mother, but because they smelled money in the air. They did not know that the gift they lost was larger than their wildest dreams. They did not know that the white box they had watched me carry out of that reception contained a future they would never see, and I intended to keep it that way. 2 weeks after the wedding, the cracks in their performance began to show. At first, the calls had been polite. Brittany's voice dripped with remorse, every syllable rehearsed. "Martha, I cannot stop thinking about the wedding. I said things I should not have said. Please believe me. I never wanted to hurt you. If I had been the same woman I was before that lottery ticket, I might have been convinced. But now, her polished tone only confirmed what I already knew. She was performing. Every word, every sigh, every trembling pause was designed not to heal but to manipulate. I accepted her apology with a serene smile she could not see through the phone. "Of course, Brittany. Think nothing of it." But inside, I was already several moves ahead. Their curiosity became desperation quickly. When they heard about my new apartment, the questions sharpened. "Mom, how much did it cost? Mom, are you sure you can afford this? Mom, maybe we should sit down and look at your finances together." And then came the slip, David's uneasy confession, his voice casual but too casual. "We were talking with a friend, you know Jake Morrison from high school? He's a private investigator now. He mentioned something crazy, someone local winning the lottery recently. Isn't that wild?" The air between us thickened, though he could not see the slow smile curling on my lips. They knew. Not everything, not yet, but enough to scent the trail. That was when I realized I could no longer merely defend myself. I had to show them the cost of underestimating me. The following weekend, Brittany arrived at my apartment with a box of cookies she swore were homemade. Her eyes darted across the room, cataloging every piece of furniture, every small upgrade, every detail that hinted at wealth. Her compliments came quickly, her apologies even quicker. "Martha, you are family to me now. Real family. I hope you believe that. I want us to start fresh. Maybe dinner this weekend, just the three of us? Dinner at their place, where they could probe me without witnesses, where they could play the role of doting children until they got what they wanted." I declined gracefully, claiming other plans. The flicker of frustration in her eyes was almost worth more than the millions sitting safely in my bank account. Almost. Still, I did not underestimate them. They had already hired someone to dig into my finances, and I had no doubt they would try again. So I hired my own investigator, Rebecca Chen, sharp and meticulous. Within days, she placed a folder in my hands that confirmed everything I suspected. David and Brittany were living paycheck to paycheck. Their debts were suffocating. Their lifestyle was a mirage built on credit and pretense. And beneath it all was a chilling truth. They had been counting on my eventual death to fix their problems. My life, my struggles, my sacrifices reduced to a financial plan they barely concealed. That night, I sat by the window of my new apartment, looking out at the harbor lights glittering against the dark water. The white box, still hidden in my closet, pulsed in my memory. Inside were the house deed and the $3 million check. Once, I had envisioned that gift as a bridge to reconciliation. Now, it was a weapon, proof of what they had thrown away with one cruel sentence. Their calls escalated. Suggestions about wills, hints about medical expenses, nervous laughter about planning for the future. And then Brittany's mask slipped entirely during a late-night call. "Martha, you cannot just think about yourself. We are family. David is your only son. You cannot cut us out because of one stupid comment at the wedding." Her words were sharp, her voice strained, her control cracking. "One stupid comment," I repeated quietly, staring out at the ocean. "A stupid comment that revealed exactly how you see me. Too old, too ugly, too inconvenient. And now, too rich to ignore." Silence followed, thick and heavy. Then her voice hardened. "You are 64 years old, with no friends, no life, no one but us. What are you going to do with all that money? Sit alone in a fancy apartment until you die?" Her cruelty did not sting the way it once would have. Instead, it clarified everything. She believed my worth ended where my usefulness to her began. "Actually, Brittany," I said, my tone calm, almost amused, "I have plans, big plans, the kind that would have made you very happy right up until you asked me to stand by the bathroom wall." The silence that followed was delicious. By then, I had already finalized the purchase of the beach house. Sunrise on the deck, the crash of waves against private sand, it was mine now. A home that should have been theirs, but which instead became the symbol of my liberation. And when David finally called with a broken voice, admitting they had uncovered the deed transfer, begging for a chance to talk face to face, I gave him my final answer. "You would have to be invited, David. And people who think I am too old and unattractive for family photographs do not get invited to my home." His voice cracked. "So what are you saying? That you are cutting us off completely?" "No," I said softly. "I am keeping everything. And you are keeping exactly what you earned. The crystal wine glasses, the memory of the day they chose cruelty over love, and the knowledge that sometimes the worst punishment is not being shut out, it is knowing exactly what you threw away." The beach house was mine. Standing on the wraparound deck at dawn, watching the sun rise over an endless stretch of Atlantic waves, I understood why people said money could not buy happiness. It was true, it could not bring Harold back. It could not undo 36 years of sacrifices that had been ignored. It could not rewrite the sting of Brittany's words at the wedding. But it could buy freedom. Freedom from being treated like a burden. Freedom from humiliation. Freedom from the suffocating grip of children who saw me as nothing more than a walking bank account. I kept my downtown apartment as a decoy, letting them think that was my new home. Let them circle, speculate, and send their private investigator to monitor my comings and goings. Meanwhile, I quietly moved my life into the beach house where the only sounds were the waves crashing against the shore and the cry of gulls overhead. The phone never stopped buzzing. Missed calls, voicemails, Texts that swung wildly between syrupy sweetness and sharp-edged desperation. Brittany showed up at the lobby of the downtown building one afternoon, waiting for 3 hours before leaving frustrated. The doorman, well compensated for his discretion, reported every detail to me. Then came her masterpiece of manipulation. A text that arrived just after sunrise. "Martha, please call immediately. David is in the hospital." My heart skipped, for a moment. Old instincts are hard to kill. But I called the hospital myself. No, David Williams admitted. No record of an emergency. I called her back. Her voice trembled, full of false panic. "Martha, thank God. They rushed David to Springfield General. Can you come?" "I already called Springfield General," I said calmly. "They have no record of him." The silence that followed was damning. Then came the scrambling, the excuses. Maybe he had been transferred. Maybe she had misheard. "David isn't in any hospital, Brittany," I said flatly. The mask slipped completely then. Her tone hardened, her words cutting. "We need to talk, Martha. Face to face. You don't understand. Your winning the lottery affects more people than just you." I nearly laughed. "How does my winning the lottery affect you?" "Because we're family," she snapped. "Because we've been counting on you, planning around you. David is your only son. You can't just cut us out because of one stupid comment." There it was again, one stupid comment. As if humiliation delivered on the most important day of my son's life was nothing more than a slip of the tongue. As if years of dismissal and disregard could be erased by minimizing the cruelty. "No, Brittany," I said quietly, my voice steady. "I am not punishing you for one comment. I am punishing you for believing that comment would work, for treating me like an ATM with legs, for raising my son to think of his mother as nothing more than a resource, for assuming that blood entitles you to my money but not to respect." She lashed back, her voice sharp and bitter. "You're a 64-year-old woman with no friends, no family but us. What are you going to do with all that money? Sit alone until you die?" I looked out over the ocean, the horizon blazing with morning light, and I smiled. "Actually, Brittany, I have plans. Big plans. Plans that would have included you until you asked me to stand by the bathroom wall. The following week, I finalized those plans. I met with attorneys, set up trusts, and began drafting the framework for a foundation against elder financial abuse. I would use my money to protect people like me, people who had been belittled, manipulated, and cornered by the very children they had sacrificed for. But before any of that, I needed to close a chapter. The final call came on a Saturday morning. I let it ring 4 times before answering. David's voice was hollow, stripped of its easy charm. "Mom, we know about the beach house. The investigator saw the deed transfer. Lighthouse Drive, 2.8 million cash, right after you won the lottery." I poured myself coffee, the steam rising in the morning light, and stepped onto my deck. "Congratulations on your detective work," I said lightly. "Mom, please, can we come see you? We need to talk, face to face." His voice cracked, desperation bleeding through. "I'm afraid that's not possible," I replied, my gaze fixed on the waves below. "Why not?" "Because you'd have to be invited. And people who think I am too old and unattractive for family photographs don't get invited to my home." His voice broke. "That was a mistake, Brittany." "No, David. A mistake is spilling coffee on someone's shirt. What happened at your wedding was a choice that revealed exactly how you both see me." Silence stretched, heavy and raw. Then his voice small. "So you're cutting us off completely?" I took a sip of coffee, savoring the taste. "I am keeping the house, the money, and my dignity. You are keeping the crystal wine glasses and the memory of what you chose." I could hear the sound of crying muffled through the phone. Whether it was his or hers, I could not tell. It didn't matter. "David," I said softly, "if you ever want a relationship with me that isn't about money, you know where to find me. I'll be the old woman sitting on her private beach living her best life." Then I ended the call. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, vast and untouchable. And for the first time in my life, I realized revenge wasn't about destroying them. It was about reclaiming myself. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's getting everything. There are moments in life when silence is louder than any scream, when a single step away from what is toxic echoes louder than years of sacrifice. Martha's story is not just about wealth or betrayal or the cold cruelty of a daughter-in-law who valued appearances over people. It is about the quiet breaking point every person eventually reaches, the moment when dignity becomes more valuable than approval and peace more precious than family ties built on conditions. For 36 years, Martha believed her devotion would be enough. She believed that if she gave and gave and gave again, eventually she would be seen, respected, and cherished. Instead, she was erased, belittled, and asked to hide herself as if her very existence was an inconvenience. What Brittany and David never understood is that a mother's love is not a bottomless well to be exploited. It is a choice, one that thrives only when it is met with gratitude and respect. The white box Martha carried out of that reception hall was more than a symbol of wealth. It was the turning point of a life. Inside it lay not only deeds and checks, but also the invisible weight of years spent unappreciated. By taking it back, she reclaimed more than property, she reclaimed herself. Her story is not about vengeance in the way movies portray it. It is about liberation. About understanding that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is not fight to be included in a picture that never valued you, but to step out of the frame and create your own. And perhaps that is why her ending feels so powerful. Not because she won, but because she chose herself. She chose to stand tall when others wanted her to shrink. She chose to invest her wealth not into people who diminished her, but into building something greater: freedom, dignity, and the possibility of protecting others who have been silenced the same way she once was. For anyone listening, Martha's story is a warning and a promise. A warning that disrespect, once given, cannot always be undone. And a promise that it is never too late to start over, never too late to claim your worth, never too late to write a new ending. If you felt the weight of this story, if you found yourself whispering, "Yes, I understand," then know this: you are not alone. And if you want to hear more stories that reveal the truths hidden behind perfect smiles, stories that expose betrayal, resilience, and the silent strength that changes everything, subscribe to Silent Lies. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are not the ones shouted from rooftops, but the ones whispered in the quiet after everyone else has left.